we go. 3, 2, 1.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our quarterly JJAG meeting. We're so excited that we are starting at the time we're starting, right? It only took, working on tech for about an hour, and we finally, got it going. So excited that we actually have quorum. So we're gonna do we're gonna shift some stuff in the agenda. Yes, we're gonna do some voting earlier, so we can just make sure we get these certain things approved by our everyone here. So I want to start first by so not only the welcome, but to see faces I know folks we haven't been able to all meet, as a group, but we have so many great things that we want to go through. We want to start first by approval of the agenda. I'm like, what am I? It's been a while.
The minutes?
No, actually, we don't have minutes. Yes, so, yes. Second, thank you. All in favor of the agenda? Albany folks, I think we'll go with, if we can always hear you, you can raise your hand or give a thumbs up. That'll suffice in terms of knowing that you all are, all right. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. There we go. Yes. So we are so excited. We're going to do a couple of things that we have on our agenda first in terms of our greetings from our commissioner. We're going to have a dialogue with Churchill Fellow Elsa Horry-Roque, who is here with us here in New York City. And we're going to move up some of the items that we need to do stuff right after that, and then we'll move into the regular items of our agenda. So with that, I will turn it over to our commissioner.
Thank
Yes.
you. It's great to be in this tight spot. Bringing this issue together. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm not going to be long because we do have a lot of things on the agenda, and I want to share with you that kind of this whole concept of youth well-being is high on my agenda in 24. We had crisis in 21. We attacked that crisis in 22 and 23, and now this year we have time, to really focus on this issue. So I want to thank the Office of Youth Justice staff and also Giza Lopez and her team at YJI, and each of you for your commitment to this work. I've been traveling the state and telling people our kids are in crisis. What are we going to do about it? They're critical partners to our journey to reform the youth justice system, which includes advancing the status of our young people who, again, I repeat to everyone, they're in crisis. I believe it's a crisis that can be resolved, right? But it requires some change in behaviors from the grown-ups. And it requires us to really see that. The work you do provides solutions that can support kind of this positive development, and we just want to step that up, and we want to call it out everywhere. That's been with me the last 2 days. I've been sticking to the message. Our youth deserve opportunities to succeed in meaningful ways and to be treated as equal partners to engage with the communities, schools, peer groups, families in ways that are constructive and productive. And the JJAG is serving as a bridge to those opportunities. As JJAG members, it's also our role, I believe, strongly to call out, to say, we see them, this is the situation with you, this is what they need, and to remind adults to see them, right? Beyond the statistics and beyond the stuff that's in the media that we say, let's tell the other part of the story. The strategic action plan that you collaborated to develop provides a holistic roadmap to ensure that we're placing critical focus where we can be the most effective, we as government, and give our youth the attention they need and deserve. This plan demonstrates our ability to change more structures that could ultimately change the trajectory of our youth. So as you move to put the strategic plan into practice, I want you to know that I value and support your efforts. And I am available for whatever you need. Together we can show our youth that we see them and that we're working to provide a seat at the table for them so that they can be heard. And for me, even more importantly, together, we can speak all of that to the rest of the adults. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Really, truly appreciate sort of this reminding us of the trajectory in terms of which we need to go. So Jack is very much, what I hope that lives in planned conversations we're gonna have later on today, that we're manifesting exactly what you're saying, because we've got to really do, as adults, do better for our youth. Our next piece that we wanted to kind of enter a little bit of dialogue around is, we have a special opportunity in having a Churchill Fellow, and I know you all learned a little bit, about it in. We wanted to have a little bit of a dialogue and opportunity for our fellow who is visiting, Elsa. Okay. To share with us in terms of sort of your journey here, and also for us, and I think particularly given sort of the commissioner's, salient points, the idea of having systems that are predicated on well-being is not necessarily something that has always been at the forefront of work. And as somebody who's in education, I can also attest that in education, well-being hasn't always been at the forefront of how we approach, and so we're excited to have some, have you join us and share sort of who you are and sort of your journey here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me here today. I will try and keep it relatively short because the discussion I hear from you will be so helpful. So yeah, I'm from London in the UK, and my kind of background is in justice reform and youth justice system in the UK specifically. And I used to work in prisons, delivering rehabilitation workshops and programs, and then I moved into kind of more policy-focused roles to try and change the wider system. In the last couple of years, focused specifically in the youth justice system in the UK, but also thinking about the distinct approach for young people, but also up to the age of 25 and bridging the gap between that transition from childhood to adulthood, which can also be that the key kind of area where support drops off and young people might fall through the cracks in support. So I can talk you through a little bit quickly around my research, but really what's most interesting for me is to hear from you and hear about the brilliant work that you're all doing. Part of the reason I'm here, so part of the fellowship is coming to the US, gathering kind of best practice examples of practice, policy ideas, and trying to bring that back to the UK and implement some of the great things I find here in the UK too. So I can go into much more detail later, but for time, I will just sort of whiz through what my research proposal is. So the project's got quite a long title. It's called Trauma Responsive Alternatives to the Criminal Justice System for Young Adults. It has sort of three key areas. One is that young adults, particularly thinking around 16 to 25, are a distinct group which have their own kind of distinct approach. The second is that young adults should be diverted away from the criminal justice system and towards community-based alternatives and support. And the third, which is really key to kind of anything working in the justice space, is that Black young adults specifically and lower income communities are overpoliced, particularly in the UK. So I'm learning from New York, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Seattle to explore some of these issues and see what kind of programs are responding to these issues. So I'll go through those in a little bit more detail and give you a kind of bit of a flavour of what's going on in the UK with some of these issues. So as I said, the first issue is around young people who are transitioning into adulthood, are a group with specific needs and should have a distinct approach. So again, thinking about that welfare approach under 18 and how that shifts as a young person moves into adulthood and how disorientating that can often be, bridging that gap. There's also so much evidence about how the brain is still developing up until the age of 25 and how that can handle trauma, adverse childhood experiences, which then can present as sort of risky, unpredictable behaviour. There's kind of a lack of understanding of that and what that means. And so both that cliff edge in support and a lack of understanding of how that behaviour presents can often mean that young people get misdirected into the criminal justice system. In the UK, young adults are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system compared to any other age group. They also reoffend at a higher rate. And there's sort of a growing evidence base or a distinct approach for this group. but we're definitely kind of lagging in terms of taking action with this age group. The second area is that young people who need support around unmet needs, so thinking around substance use, mental health, homelessness, should be directed away from the criminal justice system and towards community-based alternatives and support. So as you will all know, trauma, mental health, substance use, deprivation often get mislabeled as a criminal justice issue. In the UK, because of the limited resources, the police are often the first point of contact for those issues, whether they have the expertise to deal with that or not. And there's also a lot of evidence around actually the repeat contact with police and criminal justice system actually means that the young person might be more likely to fall further into the system. It's counterintuitive to actually have police responding to those needs. In the UK, we do have a few, we have quite a lot of police-led diversion initiatives, but often they are held with quite strict eligibility criteria, including a formal admission of guilt. And that has the result of actually exacerbating racial disparities in the process. Funding cuts have limited community-based support, and particularly alternatives like restorative justice alternatives. And so there's sort of this kind of gap between not only kind of trying to set up a good diversion approach, but also what are young people being diverted into, not just that we're diverting them, but what's the provision there. And often we're setting up young people to fail because that support isn't there, it's not meaningful, it doesn't encourage kind of long-term change, and the cycle continues. And then the third area that I mentioned is that Black young adults specifically in the UK and lower income communities are over-policed. So there's so much evidence around how over-policing impacts mental health, adds to personal and community-wide levels of trauma and mistrust. And then particularly the heavier police presence in lower income communities only kind of serves to reinforce that structural inequalities, and again adds to that cycle of repeat justice contact. In the UK, Black young adults are more likely to be pulled into the revolving door, so again that repeat contact, more than any other group of young adults in the UK. There have been a number of reviews trying to reform the system and address this, including a review by a member of Parliament, David Lammy, in 2017, that discussed racial inequality as the biggest concern in the youth justice system. But unfortunately, since then, the government have continued to introduce police powers, which, in their own kind of impact assessments they've acknowledged, will actually exacerbate existing inequalities, which is very unfortunate. And there's lots of reviews being done into our police services as well. So we have 43 police force areas in the UK, and the Metropolitan Police are the biggest police force. They serve London and the Greater London area. And there's been a lot of high-profile instances in the last couple of years where serving Met Police officers have been proven to have been involved in malpractice. There was an incident a few years ago with a serving officer kidnapping, assaulting and killing a young woman. And this has led to a lot of reviews which continue to find that the Metropolitan Police are institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. And that was a review just done last year, 2023. And just lastly, I was just kind of going to zoom out. So there's a lot of kind of bad things that I am throwing at you, but just a little bit of context on why I think this is such a pertinent issue. On the UK youth justice system more broadly, a while ago we did move towards this child first approach. So it's the idea that could only put a child in custody as a very last resort. They are child first, and while that has led to a smaller group of children in prison, what's happened is that group of children have a much higher and complex concentration of needs, which then we're kind of ill-equipped to deal with without the kind of services to actually support that. So there's a kind of smaller cohort, but their needs have continued to be ignored and they're sort of being left in custody in prisons. There's an increasing number of police in schools as well in the UK, and there's quite a lot of tension around this. There was a high-profile case a few years ago, a case called Charlotte Hugh, where it was a young black girl who was 15 who was strip searched in school while she was on her period, and it was because a teacher called the police because they suspected her to have weed on her. And it became this kind of brought into attention the idea around adultification and how young black children are being treated as more mature than they actually are. and also just questioning why is this heavy police presence in schools and what's that actually doing to young people. In the UK, young people are also in the media strongly vilified for knife crime. So there's some parallels with gun violence here from what I understand. But knife crime is really kind of seen as a youth issue without any kind of understanding of wider things that contribute to why that's happening. There are kind of growing calls to recognise violent crime as state failure, but we're still quite far behind in recognising that. And then I'll just do my last point, sorry, so I can stop speaking and hear from you. But young people are really strongly impacted by police stop and search powers in the UK as well. It's another issue that disproportionately affects young Black people in the UK. The police still claim that it's a vital tool in youth violence. It's their key kind of tool to address youth violence, and they say it's really making an impact, but actually 3/4 of all the random stops they make find nothing on the person searched, and so that evidence just doesn't weigh up. I will stop there because I know we're kind of short for time, but really I'm that hopefully that gave a quick overview of what I'm interested in, the research and kind of why I think it's so important to bring this back to the UK. I know you were all involved in such brilliant programs, some of which I saw yesterday with Tom. So yeah, I would love to hear what you're involved in that's relevant to this. Yes, inside the meeting, but also outside if you have the time. That's also
The demographic, what is the total kind of demographic of youth, and then what is the proportion of Black youth versus white youth, both in the system and outside?
Because I'm kind of looking at the 16 to 25, I don't have an exact number for both because that bridges the youth and adult system. But I know there were figures around particular like stop and search powers where there was, I think it was in 2020 specifically during the pandemic, was 20% of all stop and searches were on young Black men just in London, and the percentage in London of actually how many Black adults live there is something about around like 3%. So it's really disproportionate use. Yeah, but I can kind of come back to this more.
We want to sort of give some time now for some dialogue with Elsa, because I think there's such interesting parallels, right? The just here yet another sort of context, another society that also sort of has imagined how they approach, how we are serving our youth, right? Different systems, and to hear some of the ways in which, the manner in which, what I found sort of interesting is the parallel of how in schools particularly, because that's my particular area, that the habit of the presence of policing action is very parallel, right? So this notion of that particular type of presence within a setting that is focused on youth development, that when there isn't a proper capacity, that it could place kids at greater risk, right? Because you having individuals who are coming in who are trained in very particular ways to enter another institution with staff that are trained very differently around, for all intents and purposes, sort of a little bit more of a sort of child development orientation, that there's a clash that transpires. And so to hear that parallel is yet again fascinating, sort of brings it sort of back out and recognizing that this it's a bigger issue of understanding how we actually approach our youth. I find compelling. Judge.
So the parallels I find stunning. Stunning. Even when we think about the guns versus the knives, there's so much for us to process and really think about. We are recognizing the idea that I felt reflected in your remarks about the emerging adult justice, the focus. Since we finally raise the age of criminal responsibility to 18, our simultaneous pleasure and shame. We do have a few emerging adult courts some have been in existence for a while, and some are new and remarkable, and we're trying to figure out new ways to support them. We have them in Brooklyn, New York, we have them in Westchester County, and just really trying to use the brain science that brought us to raising the age of criminal responsibility and not stopping at 18, because we know what the brain science tells us. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for this presentation. You've got my mind absolutely on fire right now, so thank you.
And those emergent court sounds really interesting. Yeah, I think it's often when it's, and I don't know if it's similar here, but those two systems just don't talk to each other. So trying to do something that bridges what is youth and then what is adult is such, is part of the challenge in trying to get them to talk to each other. And we certainly have issues around when young people are, because we have quite a backlog in our courts, if they're going to court for something that happened when they were under 18, so when they were a child, but by the time they get to court, they're over 18, it's at the discretion of the judge to charge them rather than as a child or as an adult. And that is something there's pushes around that they absolutely should be charged as a child. That's when it's hard. Yeah, it's challenging.
Other thoughts, questions folks have? Folks in Albany.
I'm just curious where this fellowship, where are you based here in the US? Are you here for a while? What are you just?
Yeah, so I'm here for 7 weeks in total.
Okay.
So yeah, next week I go to Philadelphia, doing some work with the DA's office there. And then I go to New Orleans, a few weeks, and then Seattle. And actually Brendan was really key in helping me make those connections. Brendan kind of brought over the model to the UK and spoke with police officers and community organisations in the UK to talk a bit about that model and just trying to kind of think about how that could be implemented. And so I'm really looking forward to visiting in Seattle and how that program works in practice, because I think it's brilliant to go and see examples of really great practice happening. There's also another element of, okay, great that the evidence is there, but how do you actually get people on board with this? How do you get senior decision makers, government actually on board? Because that's as much of the struggle as just something proving to be really effective and impactful. Yeah, we have a election later this year, at the same time as you in November. Yeah, I know, sorry to bring it up.
Oh, don't remind us.
Well, we hopefully will have, we've had
Oh,
the
the trauma
same.
response.
Sorry, I should have mentioned it. I mean, for us, we're hoping that we've had the same Conservative government in power for the last 14 years. And so there's a feeling that it's going to change. The other party is going to get in, hopefully, and just everyone's kind of ready for something different, for a bit of a change. But whoever gets into power, they are inheriting like a really bad financial situation, austerity, Brexit for us, the impact of the pandemic, and now entering a recession. It's really, they know they're going to have to work with the non-profit sector to reach their goals, and they've already started to, after quite a tense relationship over the last 10 years with the non-profit sector and community organisations, where they have kind of labelled us as, you know, the woke agenda. I mean, that's what our previous Prime Minister Boris Johnson said. There's an understanding that, oh, actually, we are going to need to work with these groups because they know what's going on the ground, and we are just not in a position to financially do this alone. But we will see what happens because you never tell.
So I would say, to be fun, separately, but I think one of the important pieces, going back to the youth piece, that I think we've done well in New York, although I will not start to brag about where we are, but we've done a lot of work. When I hear you talk about UK, I'm like, oh, that's like New York City. But here is the relationship, the ability, so it's like these two tracks, right? And so there's the youth thing, everything you mentioned. But you have to have a systematic look at and reform of policing, of what policing should be, what society wants policing to be, and a retraining of that force. Like we describe it here, the work we're doing at the state is that we're moving from where we told them they were warriors at war, right? War on drugs, war on people, war on Black people, war everything. And now we want them to be guardians. And it's not a perfect thing, because the society still calls them for whatever. Yeah, I used the example yesterday during the pandemic when I was doing a control room. I got calls 3 times a week from people who I knew and respected, who said the governor has to be, has to have people arrested for not wearing masks. So we're a prosecutorial society. We see arrest as the solution for everything. And in order to change that, you have to retrain the force, but then you have to retrain the public in how to see them. And that takes longer than everything you just started. Is a retraining of kind of a resetting of the mindset of how we want police to behave, what we want their job to be, and then that we behave as a society in that vein. And that takes long. I think we've done some really good work in New York on policing at the state level. I mean, NYPD is one thing, but we have, like almost 600 police departments across the state, and they've done a lot of hard work, and it is hard work. And some of that we achieve, kind of with attrition, because, there are people they were arresting people for drugs in the 80s, and they are not happy that marijuana is legal. And so they're all, all of that takes time to change, but you have to, if you only do one piece, I just don't think you get there.
Yeah.
Geez, you guys.
May I?
Yeah.
Hi, Elsa. Good to see you outside of Zoom. I have a question. Given the strikingly different histories of Black communities in your country and in the US, I found it very interesting that the disparities are that disproportionate. So I wonder if you can educate us on how the demographics play with other communities. Like here, we see our brown kids, I imagine in the UK, the South Asian community, and is the over-policing of Black individuals in the UK related at all with the mass immigration from North Africa and beyond in more recent years? Like, what is really explaining the racism, and what are the other currents?
Definitely immigration has played, that is all that both political parties have been talking about at the moment in the run up to the election. It's a huge issue of contention. A lot of the narrative around Brexit was around immigration, basically sort of vote essentially for the benefit of in that sense. And still now we have ridiculous legislation. We're trying to it's a random bill where we're trying to basically legislate so that anyone who arrives in the UK, we can immediately deport them and have this deal with Rwanda to essentially deport them there, even if they're not from, doesn't matter where they're from, but it's absolutely ridiculous. So there's definitely, that has definitely grown over the years in terms of how we see immigration. But I also think the South Asian communities, and particularly young Muslim men in the UK, they have definitely been over-policed too. There was 10 years ago or so a program called Prevent, which was a police-run program, and it was meant to stop the radicalization of young Muslim men. What it turned into was criminalizing any young Muslim men, and the police would be in schools to try and recruit people to the Prevent program. And once you were part of that program, you want a database, which you were always on. And so there has been a lot of work. Some of that has been stripped back, but it still exists, and it's still often thought of as a way to address terrorism. And it's despite all the evidence, it's still seen as something that we need, and that there needs to be that oversight in schools. And I think what that's resulted in, understandably, is young Muslim men very angry, upset, and hurt by a system that immediately criminalizes them with absolutely no understanding of their lives, their culture, their religion, and so that definitely does add to it. I think it's policed in a slightly different way, which is why I think the focus in this project is young Black adults, but young Muslim men particularly are also subject to that criminalization, and I think that's only got worse since the kind of fear-mongering around immigration and how that's been very, very politicized around who we want to take in the UK. And there was recently something where we used old barges, so on the seed basically to convert it into what was meant to be humane housing for people who arrive in the UK. And I think it was around 3 days that the people who arrived who went onto this barge, living in these inhumane conditions. And I think within the first 3 days they were evacuated because there was some kind of mold or damp that had infected people who were living there. And just and just the idea that we are going to try and shove people onto boats, or we're just kind of gives a picture. I mean, that was just late last year, so just give a picture of where
We
we're
do that
at.
here in New York City.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like interesting.
Yeah.
Prison barge.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like criminalizing.
I'd also like to note, I don't think that the parallels are surprising at all. If you look at any country literally that's European based and has a Black population, they're over policed, literally any of them. Even in the US, every state, if there's Black people there, they're over policed. So I don't really see that as being anything surprising. But if we're talking about solutions, stuff that I've seen work personally, mind you, I'm 25. I've been involved inside of the youth justice system since I was 13 years old. I got my first arrest at 16, and I've been heavy inside of the statistical data. Youth courts and increasing Black presence inside of your policing are the biggest positives I can see helping making an impact first and foremost. I went through youth court myself. Youth courts provide an aversion program to jails. If the family at home is the issue, you need to get them out of the home. And if the streets are the issue, you need to keep them at home. So those are literally the two options for young kids. Increasing Black presence in policing, because I don't know why you would want me to look at a cop as my friend when they don't look like me. So I don't know why my voice is getting all cracky, it's a little dry or something. But, that's a couple of the things. So as far as like racial differences go, nobody in here knows my race per se, but you all assume I would be Black because that's my skin tone, as I would assume most of you to be white who's not Black. You as well. With that being, it's the basic thought is that if you're not white, you're Black. If you're not Black, you're white. So it takes extra critical thought to determine if they're Asian, Hispanic, determine Muslim versus a Christian or non-Muslim African American or Asian, things of that nature. But just focusing on youth court, increasing Black presence inside of the your police force, and really trying to blend that line of where police are there to protect and serve the community or just the people who are calling them kind of deal. They have to be seen as like, if most kids, most young people, if they got robbed, they wouldn't want to go tell a cop that they got robbed, but it shouldn't be seen like that. You should see as them wanting to help you versus it being like, oh, I'm just gonna get myself in more stuff. So yeah, Black police and youth court, my two biggest suggestions.
Oh, that's great.
So thank you for sharing. I am not a Black male. I could never really understand your journey or any Black man's journey. I have Black sons. I have Black grandsons. And I have been involved in doing time since about 1997, and I'm still doing time. I'm not inside, I'm on the outside because my son is still on the inside. Two sons were on the inside. There needs to be a re-education. And not of the illusion that has been perpetuated. There needs to be a look historically at what actually happened and what has been presented to the masses of people. Because when you look at the facts, they don't line up to what's been presented. And by reiterating falsehoods, these stereotypes can continue. But when you expose, the actual historical events that really took place and the contributions that Black people, and I don't really like to use the term Black people, melanated people have made, I think that would open people's eyes. We're not takers, we've been givers, we're creators. And that fact about melanated people has been cast underfoot. Any place we are, oh, they're poor, they're this. The richest continent in the world is Africa. Why are they the poorest? They're not the poorest. It's because the resources have been extracted and continue to be extracted, just like in the islands. I'm not American Black. I'm a Jamaican. I am. And, you know, depending on the information you receive educationally, it taints your perspective. If the media is telling you more crime, and we know crime is going down in certain communities, but they're still perpetuating the myth and nobody's challenging anyone on it, how are things going to get better? It's not going to happen. So there has to be that time of re-education. It's gonna take time because change is painful. It's like for those of you who have given birth, or maybe if you had a backache or toothache, something that you can relate to painful. That's what change is, because people have to look at themselves in the mirror, right? We may not have done it, maybe our ancestors have done it, but they're still benefiting from it, so it's still perpetuating. So we just have to stop playing the games and try to figure out, oh, how do we fix this? How do we fix that? When we already know what to do, we're just not doing it. You know, and the time comes, you gotta, I don't say bad words, or get off the pot. Right?
Yeah.
And so there has to really be that transparency where people are really willing to stand up for truth, and not manufactured truth. Because you're not going to make everybody happy. But healing can't begin if you keep putting a Band-Aid on cancer. Right? And it doesn't even heal with chemotherapy, because chemotherapy kills good cells and bad cells. The only way to kill it is with truth. Because eventually truth is going to come out. And then it could be a bigger problem. So that's my $1 million.
Well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Albany, just wanted to make sure you all had an opportunity to also chime in any of these areas of topic. Right. All right, thank you. Oh, it looks like Jenny's talking. We can't hear. Oh,
Oh, we hear you now.
okay. Thank you. We kind of heard most of what you said, Alan.
No, they can't hear
They can,
it. It's
oh,
skipping every other word. It's doing what it was doing the last time.
oh,
When I said I was interpreting garble, I should go back to all
Oh,
of
right.
garble.
oh, God, gotta love technology after all this time. Thank you, and, yes, oh my God. I'm so sorry. Y'all are experiencing this in Albany. Thank you, Elsa, for sharing sort of your journey and actually enlightening us in terms of understanding so many parallels. And I think to Jason's point, it's the surprise, not surprise realities of there being parallels to these dynamics. And it continues to be sort of our work, right? And I want to in some ways sort of fold this into a little bit of the call to action before we kind of move to some of our duties as JAG members. That I appreciate you kind of sharing sort of these touch points, because I think they resonate for us because they're part of our vision for what we're trying to do in terms of juvenile justice reform work. And recognizing that there's so many facets to our systems. No, there's so many facets to what youth are experiencing through these systems, right? And the questions that we keep asking is, are these systems actually organized in such a way that are about supporting our youth, right? And their journey into adulthood, and not creating these walls of limited potential for our youth. And that's why we have such a range of individuals who sit on our Juvenile Justice Advisory Group, and it is because of its federal statute and it existing the way it does. But I also want to say the beauty of the expertise that sits at the table, right? It allows us to have, courts represented here, nonprofits, youth who've interacted with the system, right? And other types of partners who get to sit at the table are paramount to help us ensure that we're not doing group thinking around this work, right? To ensure that we're getting to ask the hardest questions of each other so that we can get to a better place. And with that, part of the work that we have in as a JAG is that there's a set of dollars, a block grant dollars that come from the feds that we get to dole out that aligns with that vision. And so there's a benefit and a privilege surrounding that, but there's also a challenge that comes with that, just being very intentional about how we do that. We're going to talk a little bit later around sort of our strategic plan. That is, it's going to align a little bit better with where we're trying to go in terms of building, hubs of expertise throughout our state that are really going to sort of change the nature, hopefully change the nature of our work. In order for some of that to happen, and I want to sort of shift it to us as JAG members, is reminding us for us to get to that action work, I want to remind us that we have to ensure that we have a presence in all of our meetings, right? One of the things that we've been struggling over the past year has been reaching quorum. And I want to remind us that and I know that it's the last year, so it's been challenging for a variety of folks, and really appreciate you all reaching out and, letting myself know or Tom know that, in terms of things that are going on, your best, right? And I want to sort of charge us back up, and I think this is great to kind of set us off, and as well as the commissioner with her message, that we want to be intentional about this work, and in doing that work, it requires us to really sort of have our voices here as often as possible to really do this. And so I want to implore us to whatever we can do to kind of help in making sure that we're all here to ensure that we have the quorum, because when we get to talk about the federal funding, we got a lot of dollars. We've got a lot of dollars. We've got to get these dollars out the door because our youth need it.
Yeah.
And without having the quorum, we can't get these dollars out the door for our youth. So I really want to sort of remind us, and we're gonna, Tom and I and they talked about like tag teaming, like, okay, let's just, however we can get folks here, let's get them here so we can get to pushing this forward, especially once we approve our strategic plan, which is not happening today. It's gonna be at the next meeting. I don't want to sort of say that we're ready for that. It's gonna come at our next meeting. Once we sort of approve that strategic plan, we are rocking and rolling, because we've got to get, as we heard at our strategic planning meeting, the last one, the process for RFPing. Is that, I'm going to verbal.
Words.
We say that all the time.
Yeah, RFP.
Educator making up words.
Exactly, that's what we do. And then we tell Webster, right? is labor intensive, it's cumbersome. And what I'm worried about is holding back the opportunity of really institutionalizing what the commissioner outlined around the well-being that's necessary for our youth. And this is, though our monies are not a big pot, but it is enough. It is something to do something. So I want to implore us to sort of keep that in mind as part of our action work moving forward as JAG members. So with that said, we are going to move to approvals. Or Lex, let me pause here. Any thoughts, reactions, points of clarification folks want to make?
Well, I'm
Emily.
just curious, so we're not, okay, so we have a few things here, but we have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And you're saying, and we actually have a quorum today, but we're
Yeah.
not really voting on that many things.
Right, yeah.
And so each time we have this challenge, and next time you said we're gonna vote on the strategic plan. And then we're gonna
Well, so our hope is, you know, and that's part of what we're gonna
And is our
discuss.
grants working group gonna meet and, yeah,
So all of that, we're gonna talk about in terms of the strategic action plan, like
Okay.
what are the steps that we wanna agree to? As, you know, do we, you know, is part of, you know, part of our conversation later on is, you know, if we're gonna approve the strategic plan in June at our June meeting, June, yes, because we're in March. Are we, you know, is the grants working group gonna pull together and are we gonna start, you know, should we start laying the tracks around some of the RFP that needs to transpire in as simultaneous tracks, right? So that's some of the conversations we need to have.
well, and and what amount of the money that we have is, when does it expire?
Right.
Because that's the thing, I just can't,
Yeah.
like, leaving any money on the table is
Yeah.
just totally unacceptable.
Right.
So whatever we need to do.
Right.
To get ourselves, like, to calendar it out, to make sure that we have the people in the room who have to do the work and then approve the grants, so that we don't have that situation where we have money that is like so close to the deadline or over the deadline.
And that's why, so we're part of the federal funding status update is sort of what are the timelines around some of these set of dollars that are still kind of hanging out in the bank, where it's just like, we need to get it out the door. Yeah. Right, yep. So let's move to, I'm gonna, we're gonna continue, we're gonna do the approval around the annual report. That's what we're gonna do next, and then we're gonna shift to the open meetings law. We need to approve that as well. Those are the two things that need to be approved today. We're gonna, so that open meetings law piece is gonna move up, and then we're gonna move into funding proposals and updates as the next agenda item. So before I ask for a motion to approve the annual report, I want to open it up for any questions, thoughts, reactions folks have around the annual report. You know, folks got it. I'm sure it was stimulating reading, right?
We really hope you say that. We had so much fun.
It was very impressive.
Yeah. I actually read it.
I read it.
I love that.
A total surprise.
I mean, it's so like past tense,
I
even though, you know, it's like. And I feel like there were a couple of things mentioned that, you know, are happening, like the big conference and stuff. It's
Right.
sort of the date wasn't quite right. I don't think it said it was happening in the fall of 23, but
Well, this is 2022.
yeah,
So at
So
the
that's
time,
what-
that was the plan.
right.
So this was 2022.
I know, but that's already corrected.
No, you have to put it as of December 31st,
Okay.
2022.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other thoughts folks have? I also appreciate the, you know, in some ways you lose track of the stuff that happened, right? Just things that were approved, and also that while we may not have had been able to do a lot of approvals last year in terms of projects, there were a lot of things that transpired in 22 that moved into 23, that it was great to kind of see, you know, those set of actions. So, and it was a good reminder. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, there was stuff happening. Can I get a motion to approve the 22?
Motion.
Emily, thank you. A second? Commissioner, thank you. All in favor of approval of the 2022 JJAG annual report? Say aye, raise your hand, or thumbs up, whichever. Take any signs. All right, so approved. Thank you all for approval on this report and for reading it. The next piece is the open meetings law. So if you all remember, we discussed this almost a year ago. Was it a year ago? I think so. It was March. It was March of last year. In terms of a resolution to allow video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances as part of attendance. And this, as things are shifting kind of back to what we were pre-pandemic in terms of what types of allowances, we also wanted to sort of be attentive to the realities of trying to ensure that we're able to make sure we have policies in play that allow us to reach the quorums we need to make sure that we're moving things forward. So putting these pieces, this open meetings law, which is something we discussed back in March, is one of those tools. Tom, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to sort of add to in terms of highlighting around this before we move to approval, and actually others to discuss as well.
Sure, you may recall, it was a year ago, but the statute that was amended kind of toward the end of the pandemic allows for open meetings provisions to occur, and under extraordinary circumstances. There are very limited number of provisions that will allow somebody to participate from a non-public location. Illness, disability, and then there is a broad provision that allows us to put in any other significant circumstance that is sort of communicated to the chair at least 4 days in advance to allow them to attend in a non-public location. They would not count for the quorum, but they would be able to vote. Otherwise, the open meetings law and rules are that if you want to count toward a quorum and you are in another location aside from our Albany or New York City location, you would have to disclose to the public where you are and allow the public to be able to enter. So I know we had this conversation a year ago. People don't want somebody coming into their living room. That's totally understood. However, if you have an extraordinary circumstance and you are in your living room, you will be able to vote, but you won't be able to count toward quorum. That's essentially the high level explanation.
So
of
if you
what it
were
is.
willing to do that, though,
Yeah.
you could be part of the
Yes.
quorum.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
It's not like anybody really
As
seems
part of
to
the
show
district.
up here. Yeah, like,
People don't show up, but they might ring your doorbell. I mean, I don't know. if
Yeah.
It's published.
and it's gonna be in a permanent record somewhere in the minutes that you're
Yeah.
from that location
Yeah.
with whatever address. Yeah, so of course people don't want to do that.
Right. All the things, I'm like, yeah, all uncomfortable.
So, that's essentially what it is in a nutshell.
You think in the age of telehealth and all the things that were approved and have sort of stayed, from the pandemic, that we could have this thing, but.
Yeah.
Guess not.
Oh, yeah.
Lawyers.
Yeah. Albany, any reactions, comments around this, the open meetings law? Good, okay. All right, so can I get a motion to approve the open meetings law resolution? Thank you, Emily, and yes, Alan, or Alan. Thank you. So all in favor, please raise your hand, thumbs up, say aye. There we go, I see, yes. All right, the resolution has passed. We actually got all responses from everyone. Sorry. Oh, we have to, that's right, yes. Then we also, so that was the resolution, now it's also in terms of the procedures for the video conferencing, which is, that's the other part of it, right?
Yeah, so the resolution allows us to draw the procedures and then the procedures are
What's gonna look like? Do you want to explain? No.
it's pretty much the same, it's pretty much the same thing, same set of circumstances.
Gotcha. Okay.
Procedures.
Okay. So now we approve the resolution. Now we have to approve the procedures that go alongside the resolution. So can I get a motion to approve the procedures around the video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances? Thank you, Euphemia. Second, Brendan, thank you. All in favor, raise your hand. I'll just look for hands, that'll be easier. All right, we got approval from all JAG members. Thank you. The video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances procedures have passed. With that, we are going to now move to the funding proposals and updates. Turn over.
We're gonna turn.
Oh, you're good. Yes.
Hi, thanks everybody for letting me speak today. I'm speaking to the funding chart again. That's the in your packet. And around top all the fund numbers. Large balances, as Emily mentioned. There's not a lot of changes on this chart. The last couple of board meetings, we still had overall 6 months, around 7 million, 6.9 million that's available for funding. And that's broken down between our state share and local share. State share just means the money that BCJS or New York State would be spending on the Title II money. And that generally is the RED work that we do and the SCOC work, the compliance monitoring work that SCOC does for us. There's a couple other things that would be total state spending, such as the conference, is all state share. That's a go under state share. And local share is all the money that we give out to local organizations or youth justice institutes under the local share. Those are the kinds of things that we fund with local. And so, you know, we have from federal year 18 through federal year 23 open right now. You'll see that there are the lapsed dates there. All of these awards, except for 18 and 19, all of these awards are going to be available to extend at least a year, if not 2 years. So the 2020, even though it says it lapsed in 2024, we'll be requesting a 1-year extension on that in a couple of months. We can only do it 30 or 90 days before the lapse date, so we can't start that process until July. And the FY24 award will come out soon. The application for that we're anticipating. Tanya's here with me. She's my federal grant guru. She looked it up and it said looked like the anticipation was either April, May, or June. For 24 application. So
Halfway through the year.
right.
Makes
Right,
sense.
which is why we're out, that's why the 1-year extension is almost always guaranteed, because I think I explained that in the last board meeting, by the time we actually get the money, we're usually 6 months in
Yeah.
the federal award here, so. I think that's it.
Well, you know, I always have a lot to say about this. Well, I'd like to suggest that we don't, I mean, the extension is nice, but I think we should try to stick to these deadlines because otherwise, I mean, the money could be being used, right? I mean, like, it's our job. I feel like our responsibility, our mandate on this group to put the money to work.
Yeah.
So we gotta roll up our sleeves and do the work to get that money out by September 30. It's over $1 million.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, there's like endless things that we could do with this money. It's so exciting. And I don't, you know, if we get the extension and we have a problem with the court, you know, like, fine, but I think our goals should be very ambitious. And this is $7 million over the next few years to rolling it out. Like, I mean, we could do some really amazing, important work right now. And we need to. I mean, look at the pushback on, you know, politically on young people and criminalized behavior. And so we need to be setting the tone for the state on what could be done. And we investing in people and organizations that are at the forefront of the reform that we're hoping to see. So that's just my soapbox.
No, I agree. I mean, I immediately looked at as you were talking about was the lapse date. I'm like 24, not,
Right.
it's like, and I agree. So we've had extensions all
Right.
the time, but relying, pretend as if the extensions don't exist,
Right,
right? So operating in a way that would get us close to, and I'm thinking about sort of the conversation from last time around the RFP process.
right.
You know, it would be a Herculean
Right.
effort.
Yeah, there's no way we'll get that out by 24, that 1 million, but let me also just remind everyone that this money was held up. Right, that sanctuary city
Yeah.
litigation, so normally that $1 million balance wouldn't be this far into the award year. We would have had that set down way before, but our money was held up for 2-3 years, so sanctuary city litigation.
Litigation.
But then there's like millions more that are the following year, you
They
know,
all were.
deadline,
Yeah.
25. So, and like dating back to like, why should we not have spent money from 2018?
That was also held up 18, 19, 20,
Right.
21.
But what can't we do with the money that is in the budget? Like, what are stipulations, guidelines, so that way we can know moving forward, like how to plan to spend this money?
Anything you guys want, like in your strategic plan that you talk about to fund, there are really limitations to, we have to follow our strategic plan, there's certain program purpose areas, a part of our application, that we have to fund with, but I mean, really, everything's open for you guys want to fund.
Could we expand the number of recipients
Yeah,
Well,
I
so
mean, that's
that's
all.
how
and
we part of-
maybe increase the amount awarded?
Yeah.
So that the work can really be done? Because my concern would be that there's a lot of youth and there's a lot of situations that have been exacerbated because of COVID,
Mhm.
right? That would benefit, in the community programs that can meet the needs of these young people. Just going off of what Elsa said earlier, that, okay, you have these children with these needs, but there's not enough resources. And if you ask the community-based programs, none of them have enough money.
Right.
So how could we support them, which supports the community, supporting the youth?
And I think, so a couple of things. One is when we get to our strategic action plan, we're gonna walk through what we built out, because I think it feeds much of what you all are describing there in terms of like, what's the framework that we can use to kind of move these set of dollars through? And also move these dollars in a way that allows us to kind of see what are we learning? And how That's okay. Not only what are we learning, but also how do we deepen and widen that work? Particularly as we're thinking about creating these localities that are going to be the expert sites, these hubs for doing work that is representative of where we want to go. So we're gonna, that's gonna be part of our sort of strategic action work conversation later on. And I also want to remind us, I think there's also a context, getting back to the funding deadline is and I hate operating in a sort of sort of contingency planning, but I think there's a level of contingency planning I think we need to have if there's a change in administration come November, that those, because we were able to be successful in the sanctuary cities litigation, does not mean that it would come back if there were a change in administration. And that could be yet another delay, and so I think there is, back to Emily's point, I think trying to work in a Herculean fashion to move us forward to get these dollars out, I think is going to be paramount. Not just and I know that this, the DCJS folks are like, what the hell, like this is, that's a lift. I get, but I also want to place responsibility on us, and I think that's what part of what Emily and Precious are sort of highlighting is like, we're going to have to actually sort of make sure that we're consistent about what we are, whether it's the work that we need to do through the grants group, and in between and having the quorums at our meetings so that we can really support and move this work forward in such a way that we are, I worry about what may transpire after November.
So one thing I think, and this is just an option that we can start to do to spend the money is trainings, and not like trainings amongst us, but like going into the communities, maybe going into communities where they have a lot of impacted youth and maybe doing training, like for example, I know my job offers mental health first aid training for free to anyone who just enrolls, and that's something that whether you work in the field or not, like you can have that to be able to kind of diffuse situations in certain areas. Like, not saying that's what we have to do, but we can do something where they're gaining something to put on their resume, like for someone who may not even have a resume, they're just trying to get a job, like they may have first aid training, for example, CPR and stuff, and a job may be like, oh, we're looking for somebody who knows how to do that, like that's something we can offer them, and it's an easy way to kind of spend down the money. That way, we're paying the trainer, we don't really have to put in the work for whatever it is, we're paying them. We're covering the cost of whoever's getting trained, that can easily be $10,000, $20,000 right there. That's getting spent on a training that's still beneficial to the community and the people that we're trying to serve.
And that's part of, is when we get to action plan, that actual example you're giving there sits in one of the buckets of ideas that we built out. And I think that's, but the question is going to be getting it out, right? Like, and that's at our last strategic action planning meeting, the DCGS folks were really great about laying out the process. And it was a gut punch to kind of understand how long it takes to get these dollars out. So I think sort of give it to your point, like these ideas are great. I think we're going to now parallel with process, right?
So what about paid internships for youth who've had juvenile justice involvement? Because it's hard for them to get a job because they don't have or they do have a record, right? But it would help them get acclimated to a work environment, give them experience, so it's easier for them to transition as an adult into a workplace.
And there are workforce development programs out there already, so if we can maybe fund them more to have more components of training, like that can be some, because not everyone is interested in welding or getting an OSHA license or something like, and that's what majority of them offer, but if you can pay to have an extra component to that piece, like that's opening more opportunities for the youth that have already been impacted.
And what I'm thinking about is connecting with community-based programs who need staff, right? And giving them the money, to funding them to be able to pay for the internship for the young people in human services, perhaps. Because there's a big shortage, but it also would put them in an environment of people who understand or who are willing to work with them and to mentor and guide them while they develop a skill that's transferable, maybe even being hired full-time by where they did their internship.
Right, yeah. So all this is great because it fits perfectly in the elements that I'm going to walk through when we talk about strategic plan. This is all like, you're speaking exactly these hubs that we planned out. So yes.
Well, I mean, just to build on that, because at the Town Foundation, we fund a lot of organizations that are doing exactly this. So like CEO, but we could be putting JAG money into these nonprofit organizations that already have the whole thing set up. And then just to add like more youth or like broadening the age group or specialized training. And they're not just, they're putting them in all kinds of jobs. They have amazing results. And they also have some basic guaranteed income part of it as well, which would be amazing. So like extra stipends, and there are plenty of organizations out there that would be perfect for this type of funding that they're all starved for money, right? So I do think that if we have a lot of connected and smart people here who put our heads together, come up with amazing ideas. And I'm talking like $1 million, not $10,000. Like we need to put out.
Yeah.
So if we have to go through this big process, we should be doing it for big dollars.
Yes.
Identifying organizations that have the capacity to take on a large grant or a grant over 3 years, $300,000 a year or $1 million, so that so when we go through the process, we're doing it for significant funds.
Yes.
And it's almost like what we did with Project Rise, like you had to go out into the communities and basically they had to vet themselves, like I deserve this money or my agency deserves this money because of X, Y, and Z. Like it's kind of almost the same thing, but like I mentioned on one of the meetings as well, like we have to be willing to do the footwork into these communities as well, because I can come to you right now and say, hey, I have an amazing nonprofit. I would like to receive $250,000 for it, here's what I plan to do. I may not have ever done any of that or have the experience, but because I have maybe 5 people backing me like, yeah, this is a good agency or whatever, like, you're more willing to give me the money. But if you don't know for yourself what certain agencies are doing and what their employees are able to offer, it's just like going off of word of mouth. And if you don't do the footwork, you'll never know who's like really in need of it or deserving of it. Because a lot of people don't know that there is funding that they can apply for or ask for. So now that's more agencies losing out on business or money or funds, whatever that they may need to elevate their nonprofit to the next level.
And sometimes this is just the support that the young people need. I'll just give you one situation. My agency, we have the paid internship program. And we work with children that have had systems involvement, juvenile justice, mental health, child welfare, whatever. And we've had young people, we ask them what they want to do because we know everybody doesn't want to be a janitor, everybody doesn't want to be a cook. And then what one young man wanted to work, he wanted to become a legislator. And we got him in Senator Hamilton's office. Loved him. He did the internship program well, and now he's in that field. So sometimes the young people just need that hand holding to get to that next step and not a handout. You know, where they gain something in return and then they can give back something in return.
Right, exactly.
You know, everywhere we went in the state, feedback was the same about, especially 15 to 19, because that's where they have the least agency, is stipends. Stipended work, you know. So I believe we have the relationships through RISE and through OIJ, you know, that we know who to go to say thumbs up, thumbs down. And I, you know, I absolutely support any kind of stipend because it's what's gonna take them off the street.
Right.
Or, you know, again, they're not kids they're not families that have allowances and have, really extra income. Some of these kids are making money to support the household.
Yeah.
And I don't see why we can't do.
Right, exactly. And I think these are some of the elements that we could, as the RFP gets built, like these are elements of components that we can place in there in terms of, so that these agencies that are gonna go after these dollars, because, you know, that we're already sort of outlining, these are some areas of best practices that we're looking to see, because we know that it matches the needs that we have to address.
But we don't do a stipend, we pay hourly wages. So just like they get their regular check, we help them set up a bank account and, you know, things like that.
I think we call it stipend just because it's youth, but.
Yeah, exactly.
Paid internship.
Yeah.
Like,
I'll let you all finagle the language. Right, but I love it. Thank you so much. And I think this is exactly what needs to be the driver for these dollars, you know, like, you know, love to see the next status update where we see less amounts of dollars here because we know that we're moving these dollars out the door. Thank you. The next is, we're gonna talk about conferences. We doing healing? Who's doing healing?
hi everyone, sorry about my, water bottle, yeah. I'm gonna let teachers deal, because I know that I sent my son in with a metal water bottle, so I'm sure teachers are yeah. We just wanted to give, you all just an, update on the conference, which you all had, approved in December. It's in your 2022 annual plan, so you approved the funding for that in 2022. And we are proud and happy to say that that conference is this month. It is at the end of this month, March 27th and 28th. Want to give Shillings in Albany, but I just want to give a huge shout out. He has been committed and doing so much work for this conference, and we are over capacity, we're oversold. We initially started at 250. We raised and like admission to 400. I think we're currently at 450 people who are registered. We have a wait list. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback on the agenda. When we sent out the call for proposals, we received 44 proposals for 20 slots. We actually addressed the agenda to be able to add a second slot of presenters, so we could accept 25 instead of 20. And where there is a lot of excitement for this conference and I think more than we even anticipated. And there's been a lot of support from it, from, the JAG, but also our agency really supporting it and, the Lieutenant Governor has recorded a video, for us and Commissioner will be speaking and so we're just very excited about it. Thank you for you all for your support for the JAG. We're gonna be under budget, surprisingly, but that's just mostly around what you can do with federal dollars. So, but that's kind of the update and just again a public shout out to our team back at they're not here, but back in Albany, our admin team. Sonia, like, hey, can you ask the convention center if we can do this now instead? They've all been really great. So if you were able to register,
So basically no more registration.
no.
I tried to get somebody registered, it was ugly.
We're just over capacity, so you just reduce us down to 452 or something instead of 457.
But also the people registered are is a cross section.
It is, and we have
So,
lots of government, youth serving professional stakeholders, lots of young people coming to this conference. We have two organizations that so we have one doing that. We have a youth facilitated panel that will occur by one of our facilitated by one of our SNUG folks, which we're really excited about. And we have two we have two grassroots organizations, one from Buffalo and one from Yonkers, who are going to be, their young people have created art that will be on display. They will have young people there discussing their art as well as, doing a little bit of presentation to the paper. So lots of young people coming. I'm gonna get the name wrong, TC and Y, Shalane will correct me. They're bringing a lot of young people to participate as well. So we're really excited about this conference and the support that, the JAG gave to this. And I know it felt like a million years until we got here, but we are adding conference planners to our resumes. Event planners, yeah.
and to the budget next year.
Into the budget next year, correct. Yeah, so.
That's an improved federal policy.
Yeah, next year there will be, yes, event planner budget line, correct, yes. We anticipate that there's gonna be more desire for this. I think one of the things that I also really highlighted is the need, like the desire for young people, youth serving organizations, professionals to have this kind of information and access to this type of style of event. So. But we will be launching a microsite after the conference to help continue. One of the big things I know was concern was how do we maintain, right? It's not just an event, one and done. If you come, I think YJI to create a microsite to help keep some of that stuff alive.
Well, I just want to say congratulations on putting it together and the fact that you have twice as many people trying to come as you had capacity for is pretty amazing and shows that it's a good investment for us to do this type of thing. And I would really stress that at some point there you have, you garner the group for action steps of what they want next, because that would be a great thing for us to consider with our money. So the fact that we have this coalition of people coming together and being together and community and learning and sharing, it would be great if there was some sort of, whatever after, or, you have a select group of people where you bring them back together as a focus group or whatever to say, okay, now what would you do next? Or how can we keep this going? Or, is this something you want to do every year, or are there other action steps that could come directly out of this gathering that, so that we could leverage our investment in doing this conference? Because that could be like a really, because, you know, we were talking about, like, we might not know. So here you have this group that's coming from all over, and young people with all these ideas. And so, you know, it's just a great opportunity for us to have sort of participatory research being done at this conference for what the JJAG should be funding.
Well, I think one of the great ways that we might be able to do that, thanks to Shalene for giving me the reminder on that, is the Talk to Action panel that is being facilitated by the YJI. That will be the last thing of the event. And they have plans of grouping people by, you're here, I don't have to speak on that. Okay,
That's so great.
But grouping people, you know, by affinity groups and really talking through sort of what does it mean to move from talk to action, which was, you know, a big piece of the work. So I think, you know, we may get some of that, some of what you're speaking about, Emily, in that process, and then, you know.
One thing that we want out of the plenary talk to action panel is that everybody commit to one piece of action that they're gonna leave and execute. So you're still toying with the ideas. Do we have them send a calendar reminder to themselves? Do we put all of this in Menti? So it's a collaborative mural. We're still figuring this out, but we want one piece of low-hanging fruit commitment that people cannot find excuses not to do. But I'm loving what you're saying, Emily, in terms of creating a bank of ideas. Because we can see, are things converging in one direction or another, right? Given the multitude of perspectives that we're gonna have in the room. I think we have kind of half systems, half.
You know, I would have to, it's probably more right now in terms of those who were being in attendance. I think when we were first seeing registration come in, it was mostly like system stakeholders, but now, you know, I think it's probably roughly around 50-50 in terms of lots of CBOs, lots of community-based organizations. We have some of our grassroots partners funded on our Project Rise. So yeah.
And geographic.
Rep, yep, from Buffalo to New York City.
It's really great work you guys are doing. Just as a side note, I would suggest going forward, probably try to get some funding for speakers. At least for myself, if I was to have taken a role as a speaker, I had to take a full day off of work. So like, you know, it would have been like sacrificing money. That would be one thing. Another note would be trying to keep youth in the forefront of everything that we do by having youth participate actively in everything that we do. I don't like finding out about stuff related to juvenile justice in New York State or Albany late, especially since I live out here. I'm very deeply connected within all the street systems from Nassau County to Albany County. I'm very buddy with all the ADAs in Albany and Nassau County, Suffolk County. Try to stay local to Queens. Things like that. I love the idea. I definitely wish that we could have more stuff like this, but just with youth being the ones pushing it. Kids 16 to 25, they're not paying attention to this. It hasn't been promoted on Instagram. Nobody's talking about it. It's going to be more so 35 to 50-year-olds who work in programming, policy work, who probably have grandkids who might be affected by this. So as somebody who is kind of affected by this, I love the idea. Would love to see more youth-centered execution in the future going forward. Everybody, you can always reach out to me if you ever have any ideas. You know, anything going on, I am there. I really don't play with this juvenile justice stuff. My hotel was even planned last night. I had to come out of my pocket for that. I don't play, I'm there. I mean it. Like, I took off for work today and yesterday to be here. So yeah, just as these things go, because that goes back to funding. How much funding do we have, but speakers don't get funding? These are things that we can get going forward, because I love that idea. I love it.
Yeah, no, thanks for your enthusiasm. And I just wanted to maybe just provide some, we did have funding for speakers in the event that it was a hardship, right, for speakers to come. We did have a small amount of funding to do that. The mechanism for us to do that we are paying for hotel rooms for speakers who did not have the ability to do that. We did a room block and we're covering the costs of that as well. And we did have a conference planning committee. We did invite in people to be a part of that process. So we did work to ensure that we were including the voices of as many people as we possibly could. I'm just being very transparent and honest. Folks didn't show up, right? And so that's, I think, back to the call to action that Eddie was giving is like, we're with you. We're willing to do whatever it possibly takes for us to be able to do that. And I, right, for me, I'll speak for me, I need people to show up too, because part of this planning, right, and getting this funding out the door is that if we can't, we have to continue to move forward, right? And so we have to move forward. I can continue to make sure that people are invited and asked to be at the table. Again, part of we haven't talked about this in a long time, but part of that youth action committee was funding for, the young people to be able to get paid to participate in some of these planning activities. So I think there is always room for us to improve, right? In the work that we're doing and engaging. I just also ask that, help me help, right? Because I want to too, right? I believe in that. Our whole team believes in that. The agency believes in that. So, yes, and we did put that expectation out there. We do have young people presenting in panels too. Like we gave extra credit, like not extra credit, but like we gave a preference, right, when we did our scoring for those who included young people in their panels because we believe in keeping you center as well. So I say I hear you. We're with you 100%. And just wanted to let you know, like these are the steps that we've taken. But if what else we need to do to improve and some other things moving forward, we're happy to talk about that.
I might have been out of the loop at that time. I had some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just going forward,
Yeah.
because I didn't get that message, but I'm always willing to help. Everybody in this room knows I stand on business for, I'll be there in 24 hours. I really mean it. I don't play at all.
And let's talk after about what happened with your hotel, because
Yeah.
that shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that is covered. And I know that
Yeah.
I know your reservation was made. I know our team took care of that. So let's chat after and figure out I've had this happen multiple times before. The hotel loses the credit card authorization form, and then we're like, oh, we don't have it, and then you have to pay for it, or you don't get a room, and so we have to fix it on the back end. So, which is unfortunate, especially when we're talking about occurring to our members. So again, let's chat afterwards so we can get that resolved. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I'm glad to see it as well. But this is one of these things that we approved, and I think there's nothing. The fact that you're oversubscribed tells a story of that folks are not only wanting knowledge building, they want knowledge sharing. Like they want to communicate, they want to sort of partner up with folks, and I think this is some of when we get to our strategic action planning conversation is how do we make sure that we are building in an expectation of having this type of knowledge building and knowledge sharing continuously happening. So other conferences, the school safety summit. Oh, that's
Next to you.
oh, they are. Okay, so school safety summit. Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Brendan.
Congratulations to you and your team. That sounds awesome. That is great work. So maybe in the June meeting, when we talk about doling out the funding, maybe we just need to make an annual commitment for the budget to make this, because it sounds like it's needed. We know that juvenile issues aren't going to go away. They're always going to be here. We're always going to have to continue to have this conversation. There obviously is a desire to attend this conference. There's obviously a desire to already expand this conference to other folks. So, maybe we as a committee need to just say we're going to commit X amount of dollars out of this $7 million that we have sitting in front of us for the next.
Yes, Brendan, yeah, definitely. We agree. I know the folks over here have a reaction of every year. I think they're in the midst of it. I as JAG members, I think we're excited by it. And you're right. We should, if we know it's a good thing, folks are constantly desiring this, and let's make this happen, right? Other conferences, the School Safety Summit, which is happening April 17th and 18th, is coordinated by the State Ed Department. It is, there is, how do I say this? So this is the second annual School Safety Summit. The focus is on the mission is really around sort of youth well-being, but yet it's titled school safety. So, which is a little bit of a, you know, I've had a reaction to that, and I told them, I said, I don't think that promotes what you're really about, right? But I think there's a reason why they have to have safety in the title of it. But the 2-day conference, you know, we'll share out sort of, I'm one of the keynote speakers on the second day, and I'll ask them for what's the registration link. I don't think it's gone out, or it actually just recently went out, I should say. And so I'll make sure it gets shared out for folks who want to register. It is happening in Albany. Last year, which is the first year they did it, was they had no idea how many people would come, and another event that was oversubscribed.
I'm gonna start using that word.
Yeah, right, and which I think is a testament to, and it was mostly folks who are working with schools. And it was you had a lot of different folks represented. It was a strong representation. I asked for the numbers because I wanted to get a sense of like who showed up last year and potential of sort of who's showing up this year. Though the majority were school-based, school staff, principals, district level folks, there was a strong contingency, probably about 25 to 30%, that were school safety side, right? And I think it was great that those set of individuals were also there because it provided an opportunity for youth well-being conversation to happen amongst folks who typically don't have those conversations. And so I'm excited about the fact that that's going to continue as part of their mission. But that's happening April 17th and 18th in Albany. And then the other conference, it is the Coalition for Juvenile Justice Annual Conference, which is at the end of May, right? It is, and it's in DC. Right. Again, I think an email was sent out earlier regarding the conference. So as JAG members, if you'd like to attend, notify Tom.
Let us know.
Yeah.
I think you already let us.
Yeah.
And I haven't really heard from people, but if you are interested, certainly reach out.
Yeah. Ditto. All right. So let's move to the strategic action plan. That's our next topic, right? And I think it's, given the prior conversation, you know, I think we're nice and primed to kind of move into this dialogue. So what we want to do is we're going to provide a little bit of a summary from the last 2 strategic action meetings we've had, where we have coalesced in terms of defining a framework that's in our draft action plan. It is very much in a draft form right now. We've all, and we'll talk about sort of how we've been contributing in terms of writing and putting it together. But we wanted to kind of do a summary level because we know that not everybody was able to participate in the strategic action process, but we want to make sure you all get to see sort of what it took to get us to the framework that's living in the draft of the action plan. And then we want to open it up for member feedback and then have conversations around what we're going to do to get us to a finalized plan and approval of the plan for the June meeting. So I know in everyone's packets, you have the PowerPoint. It says JJAG Retreat Part 2. And I will walk through that. Are you using it? No, we're just using the packet, right? Okay. All right, we are going classic, which is we're doing paper. We're not doing a PowerPoint. So as you see in terms of the roadmap, we've gone through a variety. We did our usual development around getting us to developing this draft of the strategic action plan. We worked with our amazing partner YJI to help support us in particularly the data collection that needed to transpire. As you all keep saying, as we plan forward for what we want to continue doing, we want to touch base around with those critical stakeholders. What do we need to know? How do we need to know it to know what we're doing next, right? And our YJI partners really were pivotal in sort of helping us gather some of this data in terms of national perspective, youth voice, and also providing data around context. Those presentations were provided in the first strategic action plan meeting, which was in October. October, yeah, it was October. And then we continued it into our December meeting that we held. Flip to the next page, and now what? Right, so we landed on very particular areas in terms of wanting to make sure that we're sort of set of principles that we were working from, right? So we wanted to make sure that whatever we do, we are maximizing impact. We have clear sustainability in terms of what we are looking to fund and support throughout New York State, build a level of accountability and equity in what we are doing. A level of ensuring that that we are fitting within the guidelines that exist around Title II, right? So the questions that were being asked previously in terms of what can we fund? What can we do? I don't want to say the sky's the limits, but I think there are limits, but I think we can swim within the limits in terms of what's possible. And then we want to make sure that as we are driving this stuff forward, that we're recognizing that it can get us, we can translate it into it being an RFP-friendly type of endeavor that we can help fund. With that, we went through a process of defining. So if we go to the next page, on page 3, we outline key priorities, right? So we knew that our work that we support has to be always focused on focusing on racial disparities. We knew that it always had to be a focus, and you all remember doing the surveys or the questionnaires that focus. You all said that it has to be community focused and community embedded, and I have to say, as one of the longest-standing sort of JAG members, to see this piece. And when I first joined the JAG in 2009, the priority around community-based work, though it was some good lip service, but it was not existing in practice. And I'm so excited that this is very much, we all landed on recognizing not only community-based, but community embedded in terms of our work. We agreed that it had to be, we needed to focus on prevention work. We've done a good deal of work around intervention, and that's not going to stop, but we also have to, and not only sort of, not just stem the flow, but we have to have a framework for that, and having a well-being framework as our prevention orientation is where we landed. And we also landed that we want to take a particular focus on adolescents, right? So this age group that we've already been talking about since this morning is where we also said it's a sweet spot of potential prevention work that we want to continue doing. All right, I'm going to talk about the next top priorities, and I'm going to pause there to see if there are any questions, thoughts, or reactions. So the other top priorities, again, that came out of the questionnaire that you all responded to, were that you wanted to increase meaningful youth, family, and community engagement. You wanted to increase access to trauma, healing, and behavioral health. And you wanted to increase prevention efforts and youth-centered service delivery. Those are the 3 top priorities that there was a great deal of agreement around the table. Let me pause here to see if there are any questions before I go on to the next areas.
I didn't
Yes.
have any questions. It was more so a comment. I was going to ask, like, do you have a kind of mental health component? I guess I'm biased because I work in mental health, but Being in all of these spaces where I do community work, I work in mental health, like there's a big correlation in, it's like cause and effect basically. So if mental health isn't a priority in the home, whether it be with parents, grandparents, or even a child, like a lot of their behaviors stem from that. And that's kind of how they end up in certain situations because other people don't have proper training to deal with their mental health. So for example, White Plains, I want to say maybe January, the police were called for a young lady who was having a mental health crisis. She was having, I believe it was an anxiety attack or a panic attack. She called them and asked them for help. Instead of them coming to help, they put handcuffs on her. Young Black girl, father was there and everything. So it's like, when it comes down to stuff like this, it goes back to community as well. It's not just mental health, it goes back to community because when you have people in positions of power who are supposed to be there to protect and serve the community, but instead they're going against the grain. Now there's that disconnect again. Because if I'm calling you because I'm in help and crisis, and you come and make it as if I'm the problem, the next time it happens, who am I supposed to call?
Yeah.
So that's something we have to really focus on and kind of, I guess, highlight when it comes down to the work we do because it all ties in with one another. So that was mine.
Do you have local crisis service?
My agency, yes, we provided, and I believe
In the area.
yeah, Mount Vernon, we have it as well.
And so, yeah, you're right. So the mental health piece is one of the components that when we get to sort of talking about our goals, that was an element of prevention work, right? So it's not just a matter of, do we have crisis mobile units, but also what are the prevention sets of efforts that institutionalize mental health services and supports as common as, support, I know, in schools, we tend to have social workers and counselors and there's a divide in terms of those folks, in terms of who does what. And too often their tiered support system very much when the crisis happens. But there isn't sufficient orientation around, so how do we instill the prevention, right? That allows for supporting, we know that there are anxiety issues, but how do we temper those anxiety issues, right? So that kids are also sort of having the mental health support surrounding them. So and that was definitely part of our dialogue in building, particularly when we get to the goals. So thank you for that.
And on top of that, we look at the root causes, right? Because that's what you're saying is what's really the root cause that's driving that behavior. And so, part of when we did the RBA discussion was like, what is the root causes that are driving this? So that we're not only just looking at funding the symptoms, but we're looking at funding, like Eddie said, the prevention and the root causes of it, so that we're not, just putting a Band-Aid on something. We're actually trying to heal a problem.
So that, Damon highlights it. So to the next slide on page 4, we did an RBA, right? And for those who may not remember, we did have an investment around RBA and Trista is one of those folks who kind of guided us through the RBA process and we broke up into smaller groups. We did our 5 whys. We also talked about sort of what data supports these sets of root causes. Oh, that's a good answer. Thank you. Results-based accountability, right? Where, well, actually, Trista, why don't you?
Yeah, so results-based accountability is a framework. There's also results-based facilitation and results-based leadership. It's a framework that comes at Annie Casey Foundation, and the JAG had invested in that many, many years ago, and we trained lots and lots of professionals around the state. The great thing about results-based accountability, it is a framework to move from talk to action, and it's practitioner level based. So it's not research based. So what that means is you can look at trend data. You don't need to be really in depth with the data and the research, and you can say, okay, what's happening here? What if we do nothing? What will happen to our trend? We want our trend to go up, or we want our trend to go down, depending upon what it is. What would it take to be there, and what is contributing to it? And we get into what's called a factor analysis. Researchers don't yell at me, it's not factor analysis from a research perspective.
Using the wrong term.
I know, I caveat it, because I know the researchers are gonna come for me, because I know it is not a true factor analysis, okay? But it's this idea of getting to the, like Damon said, the underpinning of what is really driving this. So there's the leaky roof analogy, which, like, you have a leak in your, is that, for example, you got a flat tire in your car. And you're like, oh, if you were just gonna stop at the part of the problem being just to change the tire, then if you're like, why did I get a tire in my car? Oh, I had a nail. Oh, there's a box of pants. Why did you have a nail? There was a box of nails that fell off a shelf and it's on the floor in the garage. Well, why is that on the floor in the garage? And the answer is, oh, my roof is leaking. So I need to, like, and it leaked in my garage and somehow knocked a box of nails over. So if we were to just stop at that surface level, we wouldn't have got to the root cause of the why. So the 5 whys, I will acknowledge, can be very frustrating. I'm sure that those of you who engaged in that process can acknowledge it can be very frustrating. But again, it's a very practitioner level way for us to really dig down into what is driving what we're seeing.
Thank you.
Good?
Like
Yes.
EVPs.
Sorry,
It's almost like EVPs,
evidence-based practices.
but like there's less research.
It's, yeah.
Less evidence.
As
Okay.
more
If I may.
results. More results. Talk to action. 'Cause we'll sit around and
Talk to
talk about
Yes.
everything for forever, right? We will. We're good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we conducted this RBA process as a collective group in our last meeting in December. So that root cause allowed us to define the priorities, which allowed to define the initiatives, which, drum roll on page 5, we landed in these very particular areas. First I'll start with, we took some time in our December meetings to talk about a possible fiscal strategy, which we all responded very well in terms of finding it as a good place for us to start as a fiscal strategy around our key goals and initiatives. And so the fiscal strategy being that we identify some big ticket items that we want to pursue as part of within our RFP process. We have some medium-sized sets of activities that we fund, and we have some smaller investments, right? And we can look at all of these different pieces as almost feeding each other, right? So in some ways, the smaller investments could be, there's something there in terms of that practice. Let's do some initial investments to see how do we help develop its growth, its expansion, its effect, right? To potentially become a more medium-sized type of investment at a later point, right? And I think this is also a way for, to see different avenues of things that we may not be privy to because they may not exist in these big organizations, right? To be able to support smaller sets of organizations that have some growing potential or emerging potential practices. But it also allows us to invest, particularly the big ticket stuff, around what's already existing that we can braid together in such a way that creates sort of, and I'm going to connect it back to our focus around prevention and adolescence, that there has to be, and I think Jason kind of highlighted this recognition that all of these systems have to know how to braid well together so that they operate as a social safety net for kids, right? Because what we can't have is, developing one part of a system being, let's say, community-based organizations, but yet we have policing that isn't nurtured as well, right? That all these set of systems within a community have to sort of work well together. So this fiscal strategy was part of what our conversation, where we landed in terms of our strategic plan, to help support the framework, right? And so the framework it sort of has these 3 components to it. The first is creating what we ended up calling sort of these transformative youth justice hubs. The idea of these youth justice hubs is recognizing that we want to sort of design and to coordinate sustained partnerships and cross-pollination prevention efforts within regional areas. We know that there's good stuff happening, and one of the things that we learned out of the regional youth justice teams is that folks want to work together. they want to be able to make sure that they have a similar vision for how they're supporting youth, but they're also at times whether sort of they're limited by their fiscal capacities and or their capacities to be able to kind of work together. And so our idea around this youth justice hubs is to create 4 hubs, 2 rural, 2 urban, right? Because we know that there are areas in the state that are of critical attention for supporting and trying to create this type of coordinated and sustained efforts. And so that's the first piece around our framework. The second area that we looked at is building out a data infrastructure that helps to create collaborations within communities, but also to build sustainability of organizations. One of the things that we all talk about is we want to invest in community-based organizations. We want to be community embedded, but we also know that these organizations also are always looking to make sure that they're able to demonstrate their impact. Unfortunately, may not always have the infrastructures to measure their impact. And so the intention around this data infrastructure hub is to have an entity that will work with these organizations to help them to provide them technical assistance to help them build that infrastructure, and to also do the measurement pieces with them and for them, right? It also will provide us a way in New York State to have a common set of measures that we can use across the state to be able to say, these are the various levels of impact that we're having across the state. So that's one area, another area of our framework that we're looking at. And then the third piece of our framework is investing in direct youth serving programming, right? And the intention around that is, let's put dollars in areas that we see is effective and that is promising, right? Let's not lose sight. And I think we were talking about even around the youth internships, however we talk about the dollars, whether stipend or hourly, but creating sort of these opportunities for youth to have direct internships that allow them to have exposure and networks that helps to support them in their next set of endeavors, particularly as they move into adulthood. So the idea around this third piece is that we direct our dollars around direct youth serving program. All right, I'm going to pause there. The subsequent pages give more details around the framework, but let me pause there. Questions, feedback.
I just
Emily.
have a question within this framework. Where does our continuing support for the YJI fit in? If it's not direct service, I mean, maybe the data, whatever, or the management of the hubs. I just want to make sure we don't create a plan that doesn't allow us to continue to support the YJI in a robust way.
I agree. Yes. I don't know if you all want to.
I mean, they're like doing a lot of the work for what we're doing, we're relying on.
Right, right, and so we are working with DCGS that we've supported the YJI for the next kind of 5 years through an MOU to make sure that they have the infrastructure that they need and to be able to build it out. And yes, the YJI is definitely part of this plan, and hopefully, they will help us out with the data piece as well, which can be supported through the JAG money. But we wanted to make sure that the YJI was going to be supported. So, by December 31st, when everything was supposed to expire, we made sure that the YJI had the infrastructure that they needed to be able to move forward for the next few years so that they can continue to be a partner with us.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
They're stuck with us.
Yeah.
Can I have a second to express my love of the JAG and the CJS and our big thanks at the YJI. So just so everybody knows, this investment that was sizable over the past many years, since 2016, 17
yes.
is debatable, right? Has not been for naught. The CJS has picked up the sustainment of the YJI and has grown it. So I'm very, very happy to share with you all that we now have an amazing director of research who I know is on YouTube sharing impressions with me via text of all of this conversation. So welcome, Dr. Jen Vanderminden, to the YJI and this first JJAG meeting for you. We have been able to promote Avery Irons to a position of Director of Training and Technical Assistance. We are now have already hired a Director of Finance and Grants, which will be extremely helpful as we move forward and meet deadlines on expenditures and whatnot, and that's Michelle Ellis. But most exciting, at least for me, is that we have been able to move the YJI out of the School of Criminal Justice, which has been an amazing home for us for many years, but into the VPRED's office, the Vice President of Research and Economic Development at the university. What does that mean for us? It puts us at a campus level, university level placement. Institutionally, it allows us to work much more collaboratively and closely with different schools, public health, social welfare, education, and not just criminal justice. So for me, the investment that you all made, the seeds that you planted have now grown into this amazing thing that's much harder to get rid of, I think, and has the ability to make an impact. So thank you very, very much.
For us, the most important part of the story is that you're staying.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
But Eddie, I did want to add, and the reason we thought about the RFPs, right, because we did learn from the regional youth justice team, when we gave like the counties money, it became hardship for the counties to spend it. So what we had was, we had these great plans, we had these great ideas, but we ended up creating more work for the county to get the money spent. And what would happen is after a while, they would say, you know what, we can't spend the money and we're gonna turn it back. And so now then we're scrambling with that extra 100,000 or 200,000 or however much it is to be able to now to figure out how to reprogram it or turn it back to the federal government. So part of what we're thinking about this strategy is if we can RFP it out, that means we're gonna deal with agencies that want the money, that know how to spend the money, have the mechanisms to spend the money, so they understand they can hire the staff to support them to help them spend the money, so that we're not coming to the end of a contract year and somebody saying, oh, I couldn't do it, I had to go to city council or however their process works, and now we have an extra $300,000 on the table that we're all getting this report more and saying, why do we have this extra money? We don't want to turn it back, and we don't have enough time to spend it. So we wanted to make sure that not only was this process practical and, you know, how spending the money, but actually how we gave it to people that they could spend it in the right way, so that we wouldn't have this big turn back at the end of the expiration years.
So. That's a good thing.
Right.
Well, and if I just add, also thinking right within that is that's why we went the big, middle, smaller amount in terms of funding is because we didn't have all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And that's, you know, like we have done in the past because we thought we were going to be able to spend money and then program. And yes, not spending the money is not a good thing, but let's turn it back to these are kids, families, and communities that aren't getting what they need because of some structure. So I think that was also a large part of the conversation as well. Was let's make sure we have a tiered strategy approach to get the funding.
Direct services spends that money the best, but you know, trainings or anything, there's always like the training doesn't happen. But if you have direct services and you have personnel expenses, that spends down the money the best. But the flip side of that is when the grant funding goes away, does the position go away?
I think structure is like a big piece of the funding when it goes out to agencies, because if you can tell them, hey, this is what you can and can't do with it, or this is what we expect you to do with the money that we're giving you, like, it makes the process much easier, because I've been on the side where it's like end of the quarter or end of the year, and it's like $10,000 left to spend within 2 weeks, and everyone's running around trying to figure out how are we gonna spend this money, and then it's still stipulations like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. So it's like, well, that's what we want to do with it, but we can't. So the money, they don't want to send the money back, but sometimes that is what happens. So if you do give them guidelines with the money, like, it makes it so much smoother, and they can plan more effectively on how they're also going to spend the money within the time frame that it's given.
Precisely, yeah.
Folks in Albany, any feedback? See, the shaking of heads, that means that there's no feedback, but there's full approval, right? This is great. I mean, I want to thank everybody who's been able to participate in this planning process. I know it took us a little longer to do it. You know, where we are at in terms of the plan itself, there's a handful of us that are actually writing the thing. The thing, I call it the thing because I couldn't remember what I agreed to. So I had to text like, what did I say I was writing? Right? But I did my job, I did my homework. I did my sections, yeah. You couldn't find it in the drive, but I wrote it. And so our hope is, our plan is to do as it's, because it is compiled into one document right now. It is existing. And so what we wanted to talk about is some of the next steps in terms of getting us to final, right? One, there are a couple of structures that we have existing, or I should say quasi-existing, right? The exec committee and the grants group to be able to because we want to have smaller groups of folks kind of chew on it and give feedback on the draft of the strategic plan such that it is ready for approval when we come to our June meeting. So I wanted to sort of propose the idea of having the exec committee folks and or the grants group to be a set of individuals that gets pulled in to kind of chew on this and provide feedback on the strategic plan, because it does also have to go through its own levels of vetting within DCJS as well. So I wanted to put that out there as.
Can you tell us who's on those groups?
That's a great
I don't even
question.
know who's on the executive committee,
Yeah.
so.
We've had so many movements, I think, in terms of folks.
I think maybe if you
Yeah.
could send us the
The list of who's on it.
what,
Because we're,
so that way if people want to raise their hand or say, oh, I
Yeah.
can't do that, or
and yeah,
that'd be really helpful.
and so while Tom does that, I also want to encourage that we, and I want to put after this meeting to put a call out for folks who do want to participate in either one of those groups, the grants group or the exec committee, to also join, because I know we've had several members who were on, who are no
I
longer.
feel like Bob Macaron, yeah, I
yeah.
know, but he'd be
Lester
missed on
Young,
the
yeah,
grants group, but he's a
exactly.
very important voice, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that's why we need the structure is there, we just need the people power to sit on those two groups. And,
Well,
it-
don't you choose the executive?
yeah, I do technically,
Yeah,
but
like, what's the
I wanna-
process for
I want to,
democratizing
I'm
that?
not trying to democratize it versus how I got selected, I got tapped,
Well, I feel like for good governance, there
Yeah.
should be some categories of people that you must have represented on the executive committee.
So we always, have our
So-
youth members are priority, right?
Mhm.
In terms of both committees, right? But we definitely want to make sure that we have representation for both public and private on both of those committees. I always want to be mindful of it being representative of what we do in the JAG in terms of representation. So those are my parameters that I kind of try to keep on.
Maybe when Tom sends it out, he could say.
Yeah, this is what we need. I
Yeah.
need another public
like
person,
the
another private
sort of
person.
Matrix of what
Yeah.
you're looking for, and
So we'll send that out, and we'll do a call to action for participation in the committees, okay? But we'll use those two committees as the set of folks who will give feedback on the draft strategic plan. Because I think it's also a matter of, we want to get as many eyes on it to give feedback, a little bit of wordsmithing, but more making sure that, because that you all are fully understanding sort of this framework and our fiscal strategy. Because once we're done with this, we are all going to be messaging the same stuff and trying to get this out. Going back to sort of Jason's point around, because once we start getting this up and ready and RFPing out, I love RFPs, but it's also a matter of who gets to see it, who knows about it, right? And I think we have to make sure that we're communicating and we're the champions of pushing it out.
Was a grant writer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So
I do have the latest list if you want me to.
We'll send it, yeah,
Just
we'll send it afterwards, yeah, to get more people. Yep. Any other thoughts or reactions around the next steps regarding strategic planning process? And or feedback around the framework? So we're good with the big ticket, medium size, smaller investments, the hubs, the data infrastructure, the direct service programming. It's landing well for folks. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, then that was great. That was easy. We wanted to build up a lot of
We
time.
had a lot of meetings
I know.
in there, so like, you know,
Right.
the 5 stages of RBA or
Yes.
whatever, like.
Everybody's favorites.
Yes, exactly.
It might have felt like that sometimes.
Yes. All right, I guess we're wrapping up. So our next meeting is June 18th in Albany. Right? We don't.
So, but will there be in New York City after? No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We are
And
going
that
to be
works.
moving to different space. This is, space here at 633 is not going to be available any longer. We'll be somewhere downtown. Hopefully
Hopefully they have good,
I'm hoping so.
the tech is universally bad here.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily here or there.
Oh, okay.
We will see.
Oh, okay. All right, so can I get a motion to adjourn? Emily, you came yet? All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Good to see everyone. Thank you all, Albany folks. And see you all in June and in between. So.
Healing conference.
At the healing conference, on our calls, at the safety summit.